Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Today we have absolutely breaking news coming out of the area of East Asia, as we have been able to hear that the South Korean military has been put onto a state of high alert, and we can also see that the South Koreans are conducting massive military drills in preparation for whatever may be coming in the future along the North Korean DMZ. We have also been able to see that the People's Republic of China is apparently gearing up for a state of war, as the communist premier of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, has stated today that the Chinese military needs to be ready for war at a much faster pace than was originally anticipated off of original working timetables for the modernization efforts of the People's Liberation Army. Meanwhile, across the world and inside the area of Eastern Europe, we were also able to hear that a massive Ukrainian drone attack was conducted, with over 100 Ukrainian drones entering Russian airspace, with a decent amount of them apparently hitting targets in the area of Nizhny Novgorod, an incredibly long-range drone attack compared to others that we've seen recently, at least during the past 2 months of the war. We have also been able to hear a contradicting report from the Russian Federation that they were able to shoot down 110 drones. According to the Russian government, that was all of them, which we were able to immediately disprove by the video footage coming out from the ground that facilities were being hit by Ukrainian drones. Nevertheless, we were also able to see that the Russians did launch a counterattack in response to this, with their own drone attacks being conducted on Ukraine. We were actually able to see that one of these drones ended up being shot down in the first way that this had ever happened, by a Ukrainian attack helicopter using its main gun on board the Mi-24. We also did hear that another one of these drones has violated NATO airspace again near the area of the Danube Delta, although information from Romanian authorities appears to be somewhat hushed, and we are waiting for additional information at the moment about the exact details of this drone breach that was once again conducted. We are also able to hear incredibly successful news for the Ukrainians that the Russian Black Sea Fleet has officially retreated from the port of Sevastopol and to the port of Novorossiysk permanently, due to an amount of heavy losses, also the compromising of the security at the port of Sevastopol, among many other factors that have resulted in a complete defeat of the Russian Black Sea Fleet and the Russian Navy inside of the Black Sea. We have also been able to hear an additional update from the Middle East as well, as we have been able to see that the additional THAAD launcher that was requested by the Israelis has been deployed into the area as of today. We have absolutely breaking news coming out from every single corner of the globe today. And starting off with our breaking news circuit, we were able to see that inside of the area of the Koreas, the situation is still incredibly tense. To lay out a little bit of an atmosphere for all of y'all at the moment, and to catch y'all up to speed with just some of the events that have been happening over the past few days, we have been able to see that apparently, according to North Korean sources around a week ago, a South Korean drone ended up flying over the capital of Pyongyang in North Korea and dropping a large amount of propaganda leaflets over the city. According to the North Koreans, they were able to shoot this drone down and were able to discover and at least tell the world that this drone was in fact of South Korean military origin. A long line of lists of constant escalations that have been conducted in between North Korea to the south and South Korea to the north. But apparently this crossed the line, as the North Koreans then immediately started to move 8 artillery brigades with several thousand artillery pieces shared amongst the 8 brigades into the area of the demilitarized zone, given the orders to prepare for firing, meaning that these artillery pieces at this very moment are literally just one phone call away from beginning to fire across the Korean demilitarized zone. We were also able to see that at a very common flashpoint along the maritime demarcation line, that North Korean coastal artillery batteries on the island of Maedo and also on the mainland have now opened up their artillery bays to be prepared for firing against the island of Yeonpyeong-myeon, which we have seen in recent decades to be a very considerable flashpoint for North and South Korean escalatory measures. We've also been able to hear that South Korean forces directly on the island have been placed at a high alert status, but we have not been able to hear about the status of South Korean forces along the mainland at the demilitarized zone at this moment. We are assuming that South Korean commanders have most likely laid out a condition of high alert for the entirety of the demilitarized zone along with the maritime demarcation line, as we are starting to see a heavy indicator that large South Korean military drills are being conducted at this moment, as you can see in this clip. Dozens of helicopters are currently moving in one large formation from one base to the next, most likely towards the demilitarized zone, although we were not able to geolocate this footage before we filmed. This is nevertheless an incredibly serious instance that is occurring on the Korean Peninsula, as the last time that anything devolved into even a border skirmish in between the two sides was around the years 2003 to 2005, with some limited naval engagements occurring in between the North and South Koreans near the maritime demarcation line, and specifically towards the small island of Yeolpyeong-myeon. We are assuming that the situation is incredibly close either to a pretty significant border skirmish or possibly a regional war. We were also able to get a pretty strong indication that hostile actions will be commencing at some time here in the future, as Chinese fishing vessels that were near the area of Yeolpyeong-myeon within South Korean waters on the maritime demarcation line did flee the area, and we have not gotten any notices or any additional information to show the return of any Chinese vessels, highly showing the likelihood that the North Koreans have notified the Chinese government that they are preparing to conduct hostile actions, and therefore the Chinese then told their navy to contact the fishing vessels in that area and told them to leave South Korean waters, awaiting the hostile action to unfold here in the near future. We are also starting to get an indication that that may actually be the case not only from the North Koreans and the possible hints that we've been given by the Chinese fishing vessels in South Korean waters, but we are also starting to see that the Chinese government appears to be leaning heavily into this kind of a statement, as we have heard that according to the Chinese premier today, Xi Jinping, the Chinese army needs to be ready for war at a moment's notice. And according to a statement that was made by Xi Jinping while visiting a rocket force of the People's Liberation Army rocket artillery forces, we were able to hear that he said that the military needs to comprehensively strengthen its war preparations and ensure its troops maintain reliable combat readiness. While these statements seem to be the normal kind of Chinese Communist Party statements that could be suggesting that military readiness needs to be an incredibly important goal of Chinese field officers, we are understanding that this statement has a little bit more of a pointed edge to it than others. The statement saying that they need to be at a constant state of readiness is very rarely ever said publicly by Xi Jinping whenever touring military sites such as this. Usually there is some sort of an emphasis on the units being able to conduct war, but not being in a constant state of readiness for a war to break out at any given moment. Chinese battle planning and Chinese grand strategy planning largely dictates that the Chinese would like to fight a war without fighting a war, largely trying to beat their enemies on a legal level or at least on a diplomatic level most of the time. A statement suggesting that the Chinese military, and specifically Chinese rocket forces, need to be at a constant state of readiness and able to act at a moment's notice is actually highly uncharacteristic of the Chinese, at least over the past 2 years, and the statements that have been made by Xi Jinping when touring military sites at that point. This is highly suggesting to us that the Chinese may be seeing that the diplomatic situation is starting to fall apart within the area of East Asia, and they may be preparing the Chinese military for a quick defensive action in support of North Korea, considering that the North Koreans and the Chinese have a long-standing defense pact that has existed since the mid-1960s. We're not entirely sure of this, however, and I do want to make this very clear that we could be missing the forest for the trees here, as the Chinese statement may be more so directed towards the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan, or it may also be directly correlated to the high tensions that are being seen on the Korean Peninsula and the Chinese actions that have already been conducted near the maritime demarcation line where those fishing vessels left. It is either one or the other, but the statement is still an incredibly pointed one compared to previous ones that have been made, which is leading us to believe that this area truly is at the near diplomatic breaking point as far as the relations of these countries in the area are concerned. But moving on out of the area of East Asia and on over into Eastern Europe, this area has also been a heavy flashpoint for attacks and further hostile actions by the Russians and the Ukrainians today, as we were able to hear that a massive Ukrainian drone attack did occur inside the Russian Federation just overnight, with nearly 110 Ukrainian drones launched from Ukrainian airspace. These drones then further violated Russian airspace through multiple different areas, and we were able to report that a good amount of these actually flew north towards the area of Nizhny Novgorod, just east of the city of St. Petersburg. We were able to get an additional amount of footage from inside of Russia showing these drones and the resulting Russian air defense actions, and we were also able to get a statement from the Russian Ministry of Defense about this matter. The Russian Ministry of Defense has stated that exactly 110 Ukrainian drones have violated their airspace, and according to Russian Ministry of Defense reports, they also stated that 110 of these drones were shot down, meaning that there was a 100% successful interception rate according to the Russian Federation's armed forces. This is markedly untrue, as we will be showing y'all here in just a moment actual video footage proving that Ukrainian drones were able to impact more oil refinery sites within Nizhny Novgorod, which means that the statement on its level is baseless, as at least 2 drones did make it through out of the 110 that we were able to confirm on film, denying the 100% successful interception rate that the Russians are boasting at the moment. But in this clip, we can hear the drone flying over. It sounds very similar to a Lyudi long-range drone, as these usually use a 2-stroke motor, which is what we're hearing in this clip. We can also see that it impacted right there as well, kind of disproving the whole thing that the Russians claimed that all of them were shot down, because that one clearly hit its target. I don't really know what the Russians are talking about these days. It may be that they're a little enjoying too much crocodile, or it may be that they're getting some of that fine Korean amphetamines, but nevertheless, we don't really see that any of the Russian claims that they shot down all of these drones are backed up. Here's another clip showing air defense action from the Russians attempting to intercept and shoot down these drones. Once again, entirely unsuccessful, as that is the 4th recorded impact that we are able to physically see on film of a Ukrainian drone hitting a target inside of Russia. We were also able to see a 4th clip right here showing an interception. And we can see that the Russians were very excited about that. We think that maybe only one of the interceptions that happened overnight. And we were also able to see another clip here showing smoke rising from an unknown area in the Russian Federation, but once again confirming that a Ukrainian drone did impact its target and hit it successfully, as the resulting fire is caused from a successful hit. Most Ukrainian drones that are shot down, usually when they break up from the impact, they actually end up burning almost entirely in air, and the fire that they create on the ground is usually very limited in size and is quickly quelled by Russian fire brigades that are within the local area. A large fire of this size would indicate that a Ukrainian drone was able to impact the exact site that we're looking at in this picture and cause significant damage. Hopefully we will be able to get some additional information about the kind of damage caused by the Ukrainian drone strike. We were also able to see that within the Nizhny Novgorod area, just as a specific clip, a Ukrainian drone did hit the explosive factory within this area. We can see that Russian air defense was present, at least in a limited capacity in this area, as Pantsir S-1s did engage the Lyudi long-range drones, shooting down at least a small number of them, but it was not entirely successful, as our next clip here will show. And you see right over there in the distance, the bright orange flashes of Ukrainian drones impacting the plant and knocking it out. Unfortunately, we have not been able to get a geolocation of the exact ammunition plant to get a specific number of tonnage and also the percentage of arms that were produced by the munitions plant, but we do assume that it was probably a somewhat smaller number, most likely around 1% or maybe even less of 1% than all Russian arms production that is seen so far in the war. And while 1% is not an incredibly large number, at least on a 100% scale, it does mean that the Russian Federation is once again going to be running into ammo shortage woes here within the near future, as we have seen that Ukrainian forces have been able to knock out approximately 15% of all Russian stored munitions, at least just during the smaller munitions attacks that we have seen just over the past few months, near to the area of Torpets and also within the Rostov-on-Don Oblast, where 2 mega ammunition dumps were hit, both in total accounting for about 15% of all stored munitions at this point. With the Russians' high rate of ammo consumption as well, around 50,000 shells per day, we are assuming that they are openly running an ammo deficit every single day of the war, and war production abilities of additional munitions are incredibly paramount at this point. With the Russians now seeing that some munitions plants like the one in Nizhny Novgorod was hit, even though it may have been a smaller one, it will be resulting in a net loss of a greater deficit per day of Russian shells, meaning that the Russians may start to run into ammunition shortages at this going rate within the next several months. Meanwhile, in the area of Oriol, we were also able to hear of another interesting point. This one is a largely unconfirmed rumor, so I'm going to have to put that out there because we don't have video or picture evidence to confirm the exact statements that were made here, but there was a rumor that a Ukrainian drone did hit a Russian training base within the Oriol Oblast, and apparently this was one of the bases that was being used to house North Korean soldiers and engineers. We're not entirely sure if the North Korean soldiers and engineers have been able to make it to Oriole yet. We believe that the base may have been apportioned to the North Korean expeditionary force that is being sent, but from what we know, our last intelligence shows that the North Korean forces are currently still around Horel at Lake Konka, just north of Vladivostok on the other side of the Russian Federation. We are highly doubting that an entire 10,000 North Korean soldiers, equivalent to around 3 Western-sized brigades, could have been transported across the Russian Federation in less than 48 hours. At a bare minimum, it would take longer than 72 hours for a Trans-Siberian Railway train carrying most of these North Korean soldiers, or at least several of trains carrying these North Korean soldiers, would have reached in about 72 hours the area around the city of Irkutsk, which is still around 2,000 miles away from Moscow, and still even farther away from the area of Oriole. So we do not believe even if that base was hit, there were North Koreans inside the base, as they are still trying to move that expeditionary force at the moment towards this area, and feasibly, and at least based off of our calculations, that just physically would not be possible at this moment. However, moving on down into the area of the Kursk Oblast, we were able to see that a Russian drone was successfully shot down in the area by ground air defense. And here's the clip right here. We can see the drone coming on down in the middle of the front line. Ground air defense, largely small arms fire, shooting down Russian drones at this point in the war is usually unseen. Usually Ukrainians actually use anti-drone drones to conduct the interceptions and to destroy the Russian drones before they can cause any significant damage or gather a high amount of intelligence. Nevertheless, we can see that the Ukrainian ground air defense, literally just some guys with some machine guns near the front line, was able to successfully shoot down this drone, showing that there was most likely a failure of the operational requirements of these sorts of larger drones. Russians usually are supposed to fly these drones at very high altitudes, where ground air defense, such as small arms fire, would not be possible to hit them. These altitudes are usually above a ceiling of 15,000 feet. We would have to assume that due to the loss of this larger Russian surveillance drone, this drone was not flying within Russian aviation standards and was flying at an altitude of less than 15,000 feet. We were also able to see additional pictures here from the video, largely stills of the video, showing the absolute damage to the drone, and it does appear that the drone is obviously a complete loss. Only one with 2 brain cells cannot tell that a drone that's burned on the ground with its wings shattered across a large field is not a loss. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we were able to see that the Russians did immediately send a counterattack of their own against the Ukrainians, launching their typical Shahed 136 waves into the area of Ukraine. And while Ukraine was not able to intercept all of these drones, we understand that this current air interception rate was around 80%, they were able to destroy a decent number of them, with an Mi-24 of the Ukrainian army able to shoot down a Shahed drone over Ukraine. Now, this clip is absolutely crazy. We can see the Ukrainian helicopter chasing this thing and ripping at it with a 12.7mm main gun, trying to take this thing down. It's legitimately crazy. It's pretty much a high-speed chase that's going on in air over this Ukrainian village by this Ukrainian helicopter. And we see as the cameraman is continuing to film here, the Ukrainian Mi-24 has finally hit the Shahed and took it down. This is not only exciting for the fact that a Ukrainian helicopter shot this drone down with its main gun, this is the first time that this has ever happened on either side. We have seen that Ukrainian helicopters and aircraft have engaged drones in the past and have shot them down, but usually that is by a door gunner on one of these helicopters and not by the actual gunner operating the main gun on these helicopters. For this reason, while this isn't really a massive first, this is the first time that we've ever seen a helicopter directly shoot down an enemy drone with its main gun in the course of the war, which is an incredibly interesting feat in itself. And of course, while the Ukrainians were having small successes and firsts like this of their own in this upcoming drone attack, we were able to see that in some other areas there has been a great deal of concern once again to the constant violations of NATO airspace and NATO sovereignty by the Russian Federation, as we were able to see that a Russian drone did once again breach the Danube Delta area on the Romanian side, and according to the direct statement that we have today, Romania detected another Russian drone breaching its territory. The stealth expansion of Russia's strikes into bordering countries is intensifying, and even Russia's close ally Belarus was forced to deal with Shahed landings on its territory. this is something that has become somewhat concerning as we are starting to see a fairly similar pattern with Russian drones violating NATO airspace and sometimes exploding pretty deep inside of NATO territory. Romania has always been the constant victim of these sorts of violations of airspace, with a large amount of Shahed drones blowing up near to the port of Renai or the port of Izmail just south on the Romanian side. This has caused a great deal of concern by Romanian authorities, but the United States of America has largely insisted that no hostile action should be taken against these Shahed 136 drones, even if they are violating NATO airspace. And this largely directive has continued in multiple different countries, including Poland, where we did get to see that a Russian drone exploded near to some of the border towns, for example, the area of Tijowice, and we were also able to see that some Russian drones have conducted some of the most escalatory actions inside the Baltics, where one of these drones actually ended up exploding 40 miles inside of Latvian territory near to the town of Rezekne. An incredibly large provocation considering that Rezekne is one of the largest populated towns within eastern Latvia, and not only that, the drone exploded only a mile away from a populated area. An incredibly close call to disaster where several Ukrainian, well, not really Ukrainian, but NATO citizens could have been wounded and killed in that Russian drone attack. However, we are seeing that NATO is starting to get a little bit stronger in their resilience against these attacks, and another diplomatic wave has begun wanting to demand that these drones be shot down as soon as they violate NATO airspace. As far as this channel is concerned, we usually do not make comments about the governmental actions of foreign nations or our own nation as far as any situation is concerned. But whenever it comes to foreign policy, or at least pro-Western and pro-American interests, showing the Russians that NATO is incredibly resilient and has a strong resolution to destroying these drones over their skies would be a very good step in the right direction, and showing that Russian aggression will not last or will be faced down incredibly strongly by the NATO alliance. For this reason, this channel does support the shooting down of Russian drones that violate NATO airspace. As soon as they violate the airspace, local air defense units, such as Romanian, Polish, or Latvian air defense teams, should engage and destroy these drones before they're able to cause any potential damage or casualties to NATO citizens living on the grounds below. Moving on from that and into the area of Oleski, we also got to see that the Russians have done something that is a little bit unfamiliar. They've destroyed a bridge that is well within their control on the southern side of the Dnipro River. Apparently, they have destroyed one of the main bridges heading to the Antonovsky Bridge near Kherson at Oleski. This is an incredibly bizarre thing, and we can only assume that the Russians must have been boofing one when they came up with this idea, because this is largely cutting off the Russian forces that are just north of the bridge in the town of Dachi. We don't know why they did this at all, but apparently they have set demolition charges to this bridge over the Konka River and have blown it up just north of Oleski. Once again, we have no idea why they would do this. Currently, this front is not in a jeopardy of being lost to Ukrainian forces, and not only that, there is clearly a Russian reserve force, really a Russian frontline force actually, that is in Dachi, and the Russian reserve forces that would reinforce or help out the garrison at Dachi are currently in Oleski. This bridge is connecting the two. We don't know why that decision was made or why it was taken, but nevertheless, the Russians are seeming to burn their own bridges in a way which we literally have no reason to extrapolate any additional information out of this rather than raw Russian stupidity. There's just no way that we can actually formulate some sort of a logical conclusion to this. We usually try, but there's literally no reason that they should have done something like that, and that will largely be a mystery to us, most likely until the war ends, or maybe even just months after the explosion occurred today. But moving on out of Oleski, we were also able to hear another massive piece of news that came out of the Russian Federation today, one that has only been considered a major victory for the Ukrainians at sea. Many of y'all will know that this war has been one where one side has had an incredibly large navy, the Russian Federation, and one side has practically not had a navy, which is the state of Ukraine. Over the course of 3 years, we have seen that the naval battle has been waged over the entirety of the Black Sea for the large part, with the Ukrainians scoring a great deal of successful kills on the Russian Navy, including their flagship, the Slava-class Moskva, which was sank almost at the very beginning of the war. Since then, nothing has gone well. Most of the Project 22-160s of the Russian Black Sea Fleet have ended up being destroyed or so heavily damaged that they've been knocked out of action for the duration of the war. We have seen that most Rapucha-class landing ships used to supply Russian Federation forces within the area of Zaporizhia have been completely destroyed. We've even seen that a Kilo-class submarine was hit in dry dock and apparently was knocked out for a considerable amount of time and may still be going under a overhaul or a refit to try and get it back into combat service, and multiple other Russian vessels of nearly every single class have been destroyed over the course of the war. The Black Sea Fleet has literally been halved in size just over 3 years from a nation that doesn't even have a navy. Many people have been trying to see whether or not this will start to force the Russians to change their naval doctrine, or at least their naval planning within the area of the Black Sea. The Black Sea Fleet was based out of Sevastopol historically, and Sevastopol is the only port within the entirety of the Black Sea that is able to house and has the capacity to house 100% of the original size of the Black Sea Fleet. But considering the serious losses that have been taken, and not only that, the massive security compromises that have been seen around the area of Sevastopol, which has led to some of these ships being stricken and destroyed inside the port, the Russian Federation has eventually started to decide that the port of Novorossiysk, a far smaller military wharf inside the Russian Federation, is a much more likely pick, at least for safety concerns, instead of the port of Sevastopol, which logistically actually would be able to operate the Black Sea Fleet at 100% capacity. For this reason, satellite imagery and intelligence has started to show that the area of Vostochny Rayon, the military wharf within the port of Novorossiysk, has been heavily populated by Russian submarines and Russian service vessels for around a year and a half at this point. And we were able to finally get the massive declaration today that largely lets us know that the Russians have abandoned Sevastopol permanently, as the Russian Black Sea Fleet has officially moved to Novorossiysk, according to the head of Roscosmos. We don't know why the guy who pretty much runs the Russian equivalent of SpaceX is coming out and making that statement, but nevertheless, he was the guy who came out at the press conference today and admitted that the Russian Black Sea Fleet has changed its location to Novorossiysk because of the attacks by Ukrainian naval drones on the port of Sevastopol. This is an incredibly huge measure that the Russians have made, showing an act of desperation to preserve the remaining amount of surface and underwater firepower that they are able to levy within this area of the Black Sea. We are assuming that Russian naval abilities out of the Black Sea will never fully recover from this point outside of the war. The Russian Federation has never really been able to build any incredibly modern or advanced surface vessels that would be able to compare to the firepower or the capabilities of American vessels such as the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, which are incredibly populous just south of the Black Sea and within the Eastern Mediterranean. The Russians at this point have largely been relegated from a blue water fleet out of the Black Sea Fleet to that of a coastal water fleet, and we will be assuming that the Russians' naval doctrine and naval strategy within this area will start to heavily emphasize coastal water operations and only territorial protections of Russian vessels that are transiting the Black Sea, as they have largely lost the capacity or the ability to conduct larger operations into the Eastern Mediterranean or even around the Arabian Peninsula at large. Meanwhile, down in the Middle East, the tensions are still incredibly high, and we are waiting for the Israeli attack on the Islamic Republic of Iran to commence at any moment. We do not know when that attack will occur. We are hearing that it may be a lot smaller than the original attack that was planned, but we are seeing that the United States is incredibly concerned, as well as Israel, about the Iranian counter-response to the Iranian strike the Israeli strike that will be coming up soon. And a second THAAD launcher has now been seen inside of Israel, as per Israel's request just 2 days ago, and is currently on the move to a secure site to be able to conduct air defense actions over the area of the state of Israel. We can see these vehicles on the move right here, and these have been transferred to the American command that does operate American air defense assets within the state of Israel, which only has about 1,000 soldiers dedicated to this force, but nevertheless, 1,000 soldiers dedicated to the air defense forces within this area is actually an incredibly large number compared to the standard. But still, nevertheless, we are going to be waiting to see what happens here in the near future with the Middle East. But once again, as usual, this is a very low intensity conflict, and at the moment we don't have a lot of information or reports about the Israeli actions against Iranian proxy forces, or for that matter, against the Islamic Republic of Iran itself. We will be waiting for more additional news on that when we get it, but for the moment, that is all of the breaking news that we have today. I have to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for watching. It is a high honor for us to know that y'all continue to choose this channel to be your primary source of news each and every single day. And if y'all did enjoy this, please make sure to subscribe. I have to tell y'all that the YouTube algorithm doesn't really care about subscribers. Like, they gave up on that about 3 years ago, and nowadays YouTube really only cares about promoting videos that get a large amount of views or people enjoy watching. So, largely, subscribers don't really count. But one thing that always makes us happy and inspires us behind the scenes is when y'all do hit the subscribe button. It lets us know that a large amount of y'all are really enjoying our work, and not only are y'all enjoying y'all's work, y'all are really wanting to hear more about it. That's why y'all are subscribing. And so if y'all do enjoy this, please do make sure to subscribe. It always makes us incredibly happy to see that more people are continuing to join this channel. And also, think about leaving a comment in the comment section below. And if you have made it over to this point in the video today, please make sure to put FWIP down in the comment section below. That is spelled FWIP. I will be going through the comment section after the video is put up, and I'll be hearting every single comment that has FWIP in it, just because the word means nothing. Like, everyone always wants to know what the hell are these words mean, because one day it was Grishak, the next day it was Scrimpy. This one's FWIP. What is FWIP? I literally just came up with that right now just so that y'all could put something in the comment section to let me know that y'all made it to the end of the video. But put down FWIP, FWIP, if you made it to this point in the video. Also, one more thing. If you do enjoy the channel and you want to help these video projects to be possible, this isn't something you have to do, but we are very happy when people do. You can support us on Patreon. The link is in the description below. I have to give a huge shout out to all of our patrons who are currently on Patreon at this moment, because they are funding these video projects and helping us to be able to do this day in and day out and work at this as a full-time job. If it wasn't for all the folks who are subscribing to the channel, commenting below, hitting the like button, or supporting us on Patreon, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't have the inspiration to do so. And I got to give a huge thanks to each and every one of y'all who do one of those things, because y'all make this channel possible each and every single day. And so a huge thanks to all of y'all once again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, and long live the LSA.